Hello and welcome back to the WTF Sunderland podcast as we get ready to follow the lads on the road again with a visit to Nottingham Forest this Saturday evening. 10-man Sunderland were well worthy of a point against Aston Villa, and with 8 points from our first 5 games, life back in the Premier League feels more comfortable than many of us probably expected. But can it continue this weekend? To let us know, I'm joined by Greg from the Talking Reds podcast to give us a lowdown on Ange Postecoglou's Nottingham Forest side. Greg, how are you doing, mate? You alright?
I'm good, Graham. Thank you so much for having me on. Very happy to be here to chat with you and looking forward to maybe swapping a few notes on our teams and finding out a bit more about each other and so on. So, yeah, looking forward to it, buddy.
I think at the time of speaking, you haven't played a Europa League game against Real Betis. So if people are listening and going, hang on a minute, that was their last game. We're speaking on Tuesday night, so that happens on Wednesday. So let's look at your weekend draw with Burnley. Look, 1-1 draw with a newly promoted side. I think we're seeing newly promoted sides and maybe not what they were last year. So not the worst result, but how was the performance and how are you feeling like 48 hours, 72 hours on?
I feel a lot better now than I did in the immediate aftermath of the match because I was really frustrated. I really thought, this was going to be the game where we would get a win on the board. We started the season really well with the first game at home to Brentford. And it was that was like the best part of the season because thereafter we've had the Nuno episode and Ange coming in and all the upheaval. It's been a real kind of rocky road. And so the Burnley game, I really thought, yeah, we can get 3 points here. But you touched on it then. The teams that have come up, they're no pushover. This is going to be the season, I think, where we actually might see all three teams stay up. I think all three have got something about them. And the last time that happened was when we came up with Bournemouth and Fulham, and we all stayed up. Since then, it's been straight up, straight back down again. So the teams that have come up seem better organised, better prepared. And Burnley, their home record is there for you to see. You obviously played against them last season in the Championship, so you know better than I. But we were the last team to beat them at Turf Moor at the end of the season that they got relegated. And then they went unbeaten at home through the Championship until, of course, Liverpool the week before got that penalty in the, added on minutes of extra time, of added time. So, very hard to break down. Scott Parker's got them very well organised, but I still was very frustrated because we had chances, Graham. I don't know if you've seen any of it back, but, Dubravka had a worldie. He made some very good saves. And we started to see the green shoots of Ange ball. We've been we've been used to a certain style of football, which we can talk about at times, I guess, with Nuno, and everyone knows about how that was low possession, and we almost got lambasted for it. 27% possession and still winning a game of football is almost like, people just couldn't get their heads around it. But there's more than one way to skin a cat. And so now we're playing with Ange Postecoglou as our manager, and we started to see that against Burnley. We saw a higher press. We saw even the likes of Nikola Milenkovic breaking the lines and carrying the ball into the number 10 position. And I've never seen him do that. And he's burst forward. He's prodded the ball through to Chris Wood, who turned and shot. And, on another day that goes in. So we started to see things happening. We got the very early goal with Nico Williams scoring within a couple of minutes or less than that, in fact. Thought we'd push on, gave away a sloppy goal. And yeah, at points, kind of lost our way in the game a little bit. And I was worrying, thinking, is this going to really unravel for us? The one thing we have got, I think, that's really important is a very strong bench. The options this season look really good. And when we made those three changes towards the end, not 75 minutes or so, there was only one team that was going to win it. And Dubravka's saving one or two really good shots was what meant it ended the draw. So, yeah, I came away feeling really frustrated. I've slept on it and I've slept on it again. And I'm in that headspace now where I've moved on a bit and looking forward to, from our point of view, hopefully at the City Ground on Sunday, getting our first Premier League win since the opening game of the season.
I think there's a long way to go, and it's really hard to judge any manager this early on. But I've got to be honest and say, I like Ange Postecoglou. I think he's like the antithesis of what modern day football is. I work up in Glasgow and had a lot of experience of watching his teams play, and there's no doubt they're exciting. Even sometimes if you don't support the team, it can be exciting. I think if you're managed by him, it can be frustrating because as Spurs saw last season, finishing 17th but winning the Europa League. But we'll get on to Nuno in a bit. But I want to get your first impressions of Ange Postecoglou. You said you've seen the first sort of green shoots. He's obviously a spiky character. I personally really like him. But what have been
Mm.
your early impressions of him as a man and also as a manager?
Well, look, I don't live in Nottingham. I've been a Forest fan all my life. And but I live in a part of North London that is very Spursy. So, I'm surrounded by Spurs fans, and they're all asking me the same kind of question because they've had him last season. And so my impression of him was born out of really last season when he turned me off as a football fan. And I kind of got really annoyed at him, thinking, why are you being so abrasive? I know that he can offer a soundbite, and I think that the journalists are going for that. He's a passionate guy, I got there's so many things about him to like, but it really turned me off. And I thought, you don't need to be that spiky. You could be less abrasive at times and really kind of defensive and so on. And I think maybe he felt really disrespected, as if like his record wasn't good enough. And he's wherever he's gone, he's performed and he's beat what's been put in front of him, whether that's in Scotland, in Australia, in I think he was in Japan for a season or two, and at Spurs, he's delivered trophies. And so I think, he felt it seems to me like maybe he felt the disrespect was a bit too much. So that turned me off him though. And when he left Spurs, I kind of thought, yeah, you know what? I think maybe that's probably the right decision. Having said that, again, hindsight is always 2020, isn't it, Graham? I looked back and thought, you know what, right? Maybe he was actually harshly treated because he's delivered something that no Spurs manager has done for quite a while. They had Conte, they've had Mourinho, all coming in trying to deliver them a trophy. And all the Spurs fans I know and everything I hear on the media and see and the talk sport and everything else, oh, we want a trophy, we want a trophy. The league had gone. The Premier League had gone for Spurs. They were never going to finish in the top half for whatever reason. And some of it would be down to the injuries that they had. Sure. Maybe some of it was down to some poor decisions from Ange and the style of play, which we can talk about. But at some point, I think he must have said, you know what? There's that phrase again. There's more than one way to skin a cat. I've been tasked with winning the trophy. I've been tasked with getting these guys into the Champions League. Well, he delivered that. And actually, you know, he felt hard done by to get sacked, but that's what happened. I always had it in the back of my head. You know what? He's going to end up at Forest one day. I just felt it. When he was at Celtic, still, I liked him a lot at Celtic. He'd really come into British football and really kind of, was a big character. And down south in England was a character that big that we were kind of like really hearing a lot about him, and he was doing well. But the thing about Scottish football is there's that label that it's not a great league and it's always going to be Celtic. I could go to Celtic and manage them and still win the league. Those kind of things that what you hear. But it's a lot harder than that. Winning football games is a lot harder than that. So, you know what? I kind of came around thinking, you know what? I think he's going to be at Forest. When Nuno got sacked, all my friends were saying, you're going to get Ange, you're going to get Ange. And sure enough, it was in within 13 hours. And I'm an optimist. And I'm like, you know what? No matter what I might have said before, he's here now. And we've got to try and get on board the Ange roller coaster. Let's get on board the surfboard. Let's ride that Aussie wave. So, we've got to go with it. We've got to try and get behind him and see all the good, hoping that he's learned from his year last year. Let's not forget, he had 2 years in the Premier League, finished fifth in the first season, unravelled in the Premier League last year, but he got that trophy. We can argue the pros and the cons of the run in the Europa League and the poor final against Man United to your heart's content. He's still got on his record a Europa League trophy, and Spurs have that as well. And we've got him as our manager now as we enter the Europa League. So I'm excited because it's going to be a whole turnaround from what we've experienced under Nuno in terms of that style of play. And we know that Postecoglou teams, they really like the high press. They're looking to win the ball in the opponent's half, or in zones where the transitions can be quick. So that's exciting for us. And I'm looking forward to the next few weeks and seeing how it turns out.
I think when Nuno got sacked, it was weird. Sophie, who does a podcast with us, she said in the group chat, and I'll give her a credit, she went, Nuno will be the first sacked, I'm telling you. Now, we were like, no, it's done a really good job. Like, that won't happen. She was like, no, I'm telling you, that relationship's completely gone. He's going to get sacked. And then when he got sacked, I was like, oh, Sophie, you're right. But look, I thought he's brought European football, and I know there's the conversation about Palace and all that kind of stuff, but he brought European football either way.
Hmm.
And he's put Forest. Look, I grew up with Forest in the Premier League, but I've spent more of my life with Forest not being in the Premier League, which
Hmm.
tells you the kind of job that he's done. Then
Yep.
he was gone. I know there was other stuff with it, with the relationship with Marinakis and all that, but ultimately, I know you can't speak for every Forest fan, but for yourself, did it feel like the right decision at the time?
It came as a bolt out of the blue. I was actually overseas in Europe, so I missed the first few games. I was away with the family. It was in the summer, and it was like a bolt out of the blue. All of a sudden, the news breaks that Forest might be looking to sack Nuno. Thinking, what is going on? Why would that be? And because it happened so quickly in terms of the things he said in his press conferences, Nuno never said anything. It was a non-event, Graham. A Nuno press conference was a non-event. He gave nothing away. It was almost like, why are we here? And then all of a sudden, you can't shut him up. It's like, all right, okay, he's got stuff to say. It was only going to go one way from thereafter. And then it came out that it was the Edu relationship that was the real kind of sore point. So it got to the point where I think most fans, most fans, maybe 50-50 still, it's hard to gauge. A lot of fans were like, you know what? This is busted. This is broken now. Now we know what we know. It's only going to end one way. Even though Marinakis came out after the Europa draw and said positive things, it seemed like he'd put to bed that Nuno was staying and he's our man and we're going to get behind him. So it was a surprise when on that I woke up on the Monday morning. I'd gone to bed. I'm a an early riser for work. So I've woken up on the Monday morning to my phone has exploded and the news is Nino's been sacked at like midnight the night before. And I was like, what on earth has happened? And you know what it's like in football, Graham. As soon as there's a big story, you know, especially when it's maybe the start of the week. The Premier League games have happened, or in fact, it was the international break, wasn't it? So England had been playing as well. So that again, that was funny as well because the timing. There'd been a whole week's worth of no Forest game coming up because of the international break. So again, that was a bit of a head scratcher. And as soon as he was sacked, I think there's always that element of okay, relief. Okay, all right, he's done it now. If you're gonna do it. He's done it. And then sure enough, I tweeted out, there's no way that Marinakis does this without someone coming in. History shows us, Paul Martin O'Neill got sacked and was still in the Forest building in his office when they announced Sabri Lamucci 18 minutes later, 4 or 5 years back or whatever it was. So, yeah, at that point, we knew that someone was coming. Jose had just come available. So the Jose Mourinho thoughts were in people's minds, but yeah, it was the right thing to do, I think, because Nuno wasn't happy and there was too much of a chance that the circus and the roller coaster was going to wobble, the wheels were going to come off. So sometimes you just have to cut the head off it, don't you? And go, right, let's just get rid of that problem and crack on with our next manager.
It did feel like that, to be honest. And I was talking about Sophie before, and she was like, "That's not going to repair." And I was still surprised, but it just wasn't. But I think, like, I hate talking about owners, if I'm honest, and chairman, because as much as I quite like ours at the minute because of what he's done, and he's done quite well, they're largely just, and I'll often say it, they're simply a custodian. The important people for me are the men on the pitch and the fans in the ground. But it's quite clear that Marinakis plays quite a big role at Forest in the way that things happen, and he's a colourful character. He's had arguments on the pitch with Nuno prior. I think the one that I find funniest was the kind of infamous gun behind the back interview with Morgan Gibbs White that he definitely wanted to stay at Forest and had a contract. But look, you're within the club. I see snippets of these things and I make my mind up in 5 minutes, and then that's me having an opinion on this man. You live and breathe that in the same way that I live and breathe Sunderland. What's your feelings on Marinakis, and how is he kind of, can I say, endearing himself to Forest fans, or maybe not?
Yeah, I mean, I love the man, and I think a lot of Forest fans love him because of where we are and where we've been. Sunderland are a huge club, and so therefore you know what it's like when you're not in the Premier League, and it's something that you've been used to. You know, the conversation is all about the Prem, and if you're in the Championship, it's tough. And you guys have experienced some League One football as well, and so I mean, I'm in that age bracket. Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? I'm in that age bracket as well. Grew up with Clough, grew up with Forest in the old First Division as it was. That was my upbringing, and then 23 years of her after some up and down times in the Premier League. We were desperate to get back. And it was 4 years ago on Sunday that we hired Steve Cooper when we were rock bottom of the Championship. Now, Marinakis had come in off the back of previous Q80 owner called Fawaz Al Hawazi, who was an absolute disaster. Couldn't run a club, couldn't run a bath, to be fair with you. You know, it was terrible. So when he sold and Marinakis come in, I see Marinakis as a born winner. He is a winner. He runs Olympiakos. Yes, he carries around with him a load of allegations of this and that. Nothing's ever been proven. There's a lot of kind of like smearing going on. There's a lot of people that want to, get into him for having supposedly said this or done this and so on. But we judge him on what he's done for Forest. And in that time, the transformation of the football club has been nothing short of spectacular. From appointing, yeah, okay, a few managers came and went in the early days of Marinakis being in charge, but when he hired Cooper, that was almost the reinstigation of Forest being the club of miracles, as I call them. The Clough days, we call our European team that won back-to-back trophies in Europe. We call them the Miracle Men. And I've always thought of, the club being a club of miracles because of being a provincial second division team that got out and got up into the first division and won the championship and won the European Cup and so on. And it felt like something was being sprinkled on us again. And Marinakis was a big part of that. So Cooper did what he did. We got up. And then when that started, in fact, what I've said, Graham, as well, Cooper getting us up was an unbelievable achievement. But Cooper's best achievement was keeping us up in that first division. And you guys, as we touched on at the start, are having to kind of try and make that happen because yo-yoing is tough. If you can get up and stay up and then go again. That's the most important thing. And we did that. And then he's brought in Nuno, and no one really, I say no one, that's a big word. A lot of people were also unhappy with Nuno, uninspired. Why are we bringing this guy in? And look what happened with him. Marinakis has got big ambitions for the stadium. There's been talk about moving. I think that's gone off the boil now. We're looking to try and expand and hopefully add more seats at the City Ground. And you can't deny the investment, Graham. I mean, again, we got lambasted in that first season for signing 1 million players. But, the truth of it is that we were not prepared to get promoted that season. It came out of nowhere. We had a load of loan players. We were not equipped to go into the Premier League with the players we had. So we had to make those signings. You got to do what you got to do. And he did it, rolled the dice. I know we took the points deduction. But you know what? I'd take another points deduction if it meant we stay up, because I don't think that the rules are fair. I think it's all built towards keeping that closed shop. The PSR, we could have a whole podcast on PSR, and that's a minefield. So look, in a nutshell, Marinakis great for Forest. He's got his faults. He's a flawed character. He is. But no one's perfect. We love him banning Gary Neville when he did that. We love him doing the things he does. We love him greeting the players as they come off with big hugs. He's an involved manager, involved owner, and he's putting his money where his mouth is, and that's what you want from an owner. I think we're very, very lucky. I really do.
Do you think because of the stuff I mentioned before, the arguing on the pitch and the Morgan Gibbs White thing, and social media can be toxic at the best of times, and people, like I said before, make an opinion in 5 minutes. He's quite clearly a colourful character, but do you think people don't give him anywhere near enough credit for what he's done? Because when you've just read everything out there, I had a preconceived idea of him going into that question, and now I'm like, oh, fucking hell, that's actually a really valid point. He's actually totally transformed that club. But people don't really speak about that, do they? Because it doesn't sell the headline as
That's
well.
it. But before we got up, You ask your Gary Nevilles and your Jamie Carragher's, and you ask your Talksport hosts, they would all say, oh, you know what? I'd love Nottingham Forest to get back up. Nottingham Forest belong in the Premier League. Let's get Forest back up. Of course, when Forest come back up again and start behaving like a Premier League club or what we think, because we're where we think we should be. And Marinakis said, at Wembley after the Championship playoff final, I want to bring trophies in European football to Nottingham Forest. Well, he's done that within 4 years. We're in season 4 of being back in the Premier League. He is a pantomime villain. The media love nothing because of the beard, his weight. He's a target. He sits in the his perfectly constructed, luxurious padded seat at the City Ground. He's got the TV. I mean, I think he must have shares in Curry's or something because he's smashed that many TVs with frustration. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He is built to succeed. And the transformation in the stadium, it looks so tired. You go to the City Ground, and it's one of those old-fashioned stadiums, Graham. I don't know if you've been to City Ground, but it used to be, you go in and it just looked dated. But even with the fascia stuff, like when you put the nice trim in, you invest in better seating for the dugouts. You invest in just making the stadium look Premier League as well. And those little things go a long way. And that, these things aren't cheap. So, a lot of owners don't look at those details. And when you go into the City Ground, you feel a sense of pride in what you've got. We wish it was better. And we know we need a bigger stadium because that's how you can start to create better revenue. But he is, it was, after the Everton game, what other club tweets out like veiled threats about fourth officials being biased? I mean, it was explosive stuff. The catalogue of we did on our podcast in that season. So it was not last season, the season before. So we're talking season 2 back in the Premier League felt really difficult for us. Season 1 in the Premier League, where we stayed up, was tough. But the second season, there was so much going on off the pitch, the tweets, various other things as well. We just catalogued them, and it was like we've got to get past this. So it can be frustrating. He's not, like I say, he's not perfect. But listen, I listen to other clubs. Man United are moaning about the Glazers non-stop. Other clubs are moaning about their owners. West Ham are having kittens at the moment about David Sullivan. And I look at Marinakis and think, please don't ever leave our club, because I don't know what would happen if you did.
It's interesting that you talked about the stadium and the infrastructure. We've done quite a bit ourselves, new tunnel, and we were just watching the highlights the other day, and normally you'll watch it for the goals, and the goals are still my favourite part, I'll be honest. But we've had this new tunnel and it just looks class. And it does give you a pride. And look, the stadium, like, it's a fantastic stadium. It's the spiritual home of, well, actually, no, Roker Park is, but that's by the by. That's another podcast for another day. But you want to go there and you want to be proud of where you're from. And at the minute, I go to the Stadium Light, and yes, I'm really proud of the team and what's going on, and I feel confident. But the way the stadium looks, it looks closer to what it was like in 1997 as opposed to what it looked like in 2022, 2021. And it does make a real big difference. But I'm going to completely move on to something different.
Sure.
And I wanted to ask this question mainly because of Ange Postecoglou, and I'm interested in the mindset of Nottingham Forest fans. Spurs fans last season got really frustrated that they finished 17th. And I thought, from the outside looking in, I watched the game in Portugal just before our playoff final, and I thought, pardon my French here, but fucking hell, the things that I would do to win a European trophy, I'd chop a bollock off, if I'm completely honest with you. I'd probably
Yeah.
just give you one of the left or the right, and you can have a European trophy. I don't care where you finish in the league. Would you take, not 17th, but would you take a poor season to win the Europa League because you're joint second favourites to win it with Roma, with Villa, obviously the favourites?
Well, it's funny because this is the question that I've been asking on our podcast. I asked it on Sunday after when we did the review show for the Burnley match. I had a couple of contributors on then. I did a podcast earlier to preview Betis with some of our regulars, and I asked that very question of them. Would you take 17th? Has to be 17th. You finish 17th in the Premier League, but you win the Europa. And I would bite your balls off for it in a heartbeat, because to me, it's an absolute no brainer. It's just a no-brainer. One or two of them undenied, which shocked the hell out of me. I'm like, what are you thinking? We're not in the same space as Spurs. Growing up, Graham, you and I are from the same kind of era, it seems. Forest were side by side with Spurs, and in terms of size of club, Forest were probably bigger. We'd won European trophies. We were winning things at Wembley, and year in, year out, we were beating Spurs regularly. Of course, when you go down for 23 years and and of course, the way the Premier League's grown as well, the thing is, we missed the real involvement of the Premier League, and I'm talking the money. So the money is flooded in. It's gone from being not really anything to catastrophic, cataclysmic, unbelievable amounts of money. Players are earning £350,000 a week, some of them, and not playing football, such as Raheem Sterling. It's absolutely bonkers. So when Spurs, and this is a bit of a head scratcher as well, but I can kind of get it because of where they think they should be and where they kind of have been competing for top four. They got to a Champions League final, but they hadn't won anything, right? For whatever it was, 20 odd years, 23 years, I don't know. They're still a little bit kind of got their heads up their ass when they kind of turn their noses up at that one-off, what potentially be a one-off season. He had a bit of a tough time with injuries, we know, but you can't put it all on that. We have to look at the style of play and failure to adapt and in-game management as well. And that's why I said earlier, I hope and I think he will have potentially have learned from that, hopefully. But you know what? Forest, different space, 23 years in the wilderness, just getting back in the Premier League, just getting ourselves re-established, dreaming of trying to get into Europe. We would have loved to be in the conference. If we'd ended up in the conference, I know we got in the back door into the Europa. A lot of us were saying, you know what? Softly, let's go conference. Much better chance of winning that. We have a great time in Europe, which is what we want. We want to go on a bit of a jolly. We can win a major trophy, because let's face it, winning the Conference League is still a major trophy. It's a European trophy, and that gets you in the Europa for next season. So a lot of us would have taken that, but now we're in the Europa and we're kicking off tomorrow against Real Betis, 4,000 travelling Nottingham Forest fans in Seville, loving every second of it. Yes, give me the Europa League. Give me 17th right now. Give me the worst season any Premier League team has ever had in the Premier League and survived. I'll take that right now, and a Europa League trophy. Champions League next year. We go again. We probably won't be down to Postecoglou, but we roll the dice and off we go.
Yeah, I've got to. I mean, it's different for me because I'd take 17th without the European trophy at the minute. But like, if I could have both.
Well, exactly. We did that in season one. I think we finished 16th. In season two, it was 17th, and last year was 7th. So
you build, don't you? I think it's interesting you said about, like, because it feels like Forest have been there for ages. Like, we are of a similar era. I remember Forest winning the league and us going to Forest and winning 3-1 and getting beaten in the playoffs and then getting the 105 points. And when it was us, Borough and Forest 97, 98. But it feels like Forest has actually been up for ages, which in reality you haven't. Not really. It hasn't been like a decade or anything. But a lot of people, and it really frustrated me, to be honest, and this is not a detriment towards Nottingham Forest or the way they did it, and it's not a detriment to the way we've done it. But I felt a lot of people really lazily compared our summer business to what you did a few years ago. I think it's different, and the devil's in the detail, and I don't have to educate Forest or Sunderland fans on why it's different. But I wouldn't mind having the same trajectory as yourself, as I've just kind of pointed out. What would your advice be to Sunderland fans for how you can stay in the division, begin to flourish in the top tier like you have done yourself? What do we need to do to mirror something similar to what you've had?
First and foremost, play the same way you played on Sunday against Everton. Not Everton, Aston Villa. Sorry, Aston Villa. Play like that week in, week out, and you'll be absolutely fine. I watched that match. I was so impressed with the heart and determination of those Sunderland players. 10 men. You can argue the merits of that, but down to 10 men. You've got to be canny when you come up. And that's why I talked about Burnley and Scott Parker. I think he's learned, because he came up with Fulham and he came up with Bournemouth, or took over at Bournemouth, or whatever it was. Can't quite remember. But so he's been a manager with newly promoted teams, and they've been getting pumped. And so it seems like he's learned. You take a more pragmatic style, and he almost adopted that in that championship season, didn't he? with that kind of let's shut up shop and let's keep it tight and build from the back. And that's really for me what it's all about. I think, if you're going to go and try and get into teams, you're going to come undone. I think you need to be cautious, and sometimes that means sacrificing the kind of style of football you want to see, maybe in the first season back. I don't know an awful lot about your manager. I don't know an awful lot about your team and so on. I know you brought in what, 6 or 7 new players at least or thereabouts, probably even maybe a few more, I think. So I would say be patient. Remember, I mean, how long were you down for? Was it about 8 or 9 years you were down in the down for out of the Prem?
For I think there's 8 years in total, but 4 of those were in League One, which
Right. So
PTSD.
it stings even more, doesn't it? When
Yeah,
when you don't go down, you go down again. It feels like, my God, we're never going to get back. And once you get back, we knew, I think, that if we didn't stay up, we could really struggle for a few years, or the potential was there. There's no guarantees, is there? I know that Sheffield United have been up and down, and Burnley have done it, and Southampton have been doing it a little bit. Norwich seemed to do it for a while, but they've dropped off. I think you only get so many goes at it, don't you? Norwich seem to come up, spend no money, and go back down again. And I think you have to roll the dice. We did it in a big way. It's really nice to see teams come up and trying to recruit, and your recruitment's got to be good. I think Granit Xhaka is an absolutely fantastic piece of business. It really is. In the same way that I think, having seen him play for Burnley, Kyle Walker, now I was writing Kyle Walker off. I don't think he's good enough for England still. He's past his best, but he was the best player for Burnley apart from their goalkeeper on Saturday. He took care of Dan Indoy, our new Swiss international, who was playing on the left hand side. Couldn't get a sniff. Kyle Walker saw him out, and he was just controlling that period of the pitch, or that area of the pitch. And I think if you've got a very experienced player like you've got in Granit Xhaka, that really can have an effect on those around him. If you've been canny with your other recruitment as well, so I think that's really key for you guys. But being patient, the fans, you guys, I hope will be patient. I mean, is it Lebris you've got in charge? Is it
yeah.
Lebris? Is that how you say it? Lebris,
Libris,
Lebris.
apparently.
I mean, I think he's been with you, what, about, was it a year that he was with you for the last year, wasn't he? He got you up. He's got appointed and then got you up. So I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on him? I mean, he's obviously got you back into the promised land. I'll ask you a question: is he the kind of guy that you think will still be in charge come the end of the season?
God, I hope so. Yeah, it's look. I think there's been certain. I talked about this before. There's been certain Sunderland managers that I think you have to be. I always thought, should we say, you have to be a certain way to be a Sunderland manager, and the only other way I can describe it is you have to be a character. Roy Keane, Peter Reid, Sam Allardyce, Mick McCarthy to an extent, all had levels of success. Lebris is completely different. He is, get him a cigar, get him some slippers. He's the most chilled out, calm person ever. And it's the first time I've seen, because Sunderland is a goldfish bowl. It's a one city club, it's a total goldfish bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the city lives for football. We all love football. I live up in Glasgow and I think about Sunderland every single day of my life. And I still have my season ticket and I still go back and it still dictates my mood. Lebris is fantastic at just calming that down, and he's tactically astute, and he's helped by look, a board that has had its criticism in the past. It doesn't have much from me right now, and I'm quite happy to say I've been wrong on a few things with that. So for me, yeah, I'd be delighted, come what may. I want him to be the boss because he seems to align so perfectly. I mean, we lost 5 games prior to going in the playoffs, and the playoffs was the best 10 days of my life. I'll never have a day as good as that. When I have my kid, sorry kid, it's not going to be as good as that because I'll expect the child coming after the 9 month. I won't expect what happened in the playoffs to have happened. And we'd lost 5 games going into that, and I was having kittens, and I'm thinking, oh God, like this is going to be awful. And he basically said, calm the fuck down. We'll be fine. We'll be ready. And we were, and we won it, and it was brilliant. And I don't think I'll ever feel as high as that, but I still haven't quite come down because of how good the start of the season's been. And a lot of that has been how well we've recruited and how well the players that have came up with us, the 4 or 5 that have contributed so far, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future with the ones that have started coming off the bench and stuff. But I pre-warned you that I was going to give you this question, so I might as well go for it. You've touched on one player before, but I know your ambitions are different to ours at the moment. I get that. But if you could take one player from our squad to put into your
Mhm.
squad for whatever reason, who would it be and why would it be?
So I like the look of your striker. Is it Wilson Isidore?
Love Wilson
Yeah,
as a
he's
dog.
your top. He's your early top scorer. I think he's got three
Mm.
goals. He plays as a bit of a focal striker, a bit more of an old fashioned kind of. He's got very good finishing from what I've seen as well. And so I'd take him. He'd be the player I'd take from what I've seen of him, because finding a good striker is very hard these days. Yes, we've got Chris Wood, who obviously is having a renaissance in the, he's 33, 34. We've signed Igor Jesus from Botafogo, who has been really promising, and we like the look of him. But yeah, I would add Wilson Isidore into our squad for you guys. But obviously, I mean, the obvious one is Granit Xhaka. Everyone would say him, but I like Simon Adingra. That's another good signing from Brighton. He's a very good player. He's got pace. He's very direct from wide areas. He supports in your transitions, I think. So Adingra, we were looking at him, I think, at one point, I think. So yeah, Isidore I like the look of. I know that I think from what I've read and seen as well, I haven't seen an awful lot of you guys, but it looks like Lebris is maybe focusing a bit on your set pieces as well as a way of you guys getting goals. I know that Ballard is a big player for you. Obviously that goal in the semi-final, I remember watching it and I was like, holy fuck, he scored like that. I couldn't believe it. And I was pumping the air thinking, what a goal. And I was really thrilled for Sunderland because again, it's just from the outside looking in, it's just a club you want to see get back up again. Um, Especially when you want to see Sunderland play Newcastle in the Premier League. We as neutrals for that game. It's something we want to see as well. So yeah, really interesting to see how you guys do this. In one more thing I'll say on Lebris though, and this is maybe going back to what you're asking about advice or thoughts. We were so in love with Cooper. He was the new Messiah, the next coming, getting us up. The connection he had with the fans, he just got the club like no other manager has got for such a long time. And everyone was just completely swept away with how he'd done for us. And in that first season, when we were realistic and we signed players that, some of those signings never got a kick at Forest. We were loaning players out. Everyone seems to think we signed 30 odd players. A lot of them went on loan to Olympiacos or back on loan into the Championship. We signed Josh Bowler in that batch, never played a game for us because we were almost half preparing for going back down again. So we were kind of almost stacking players up. But anyway, Cooper had it really difficult. And when he kept us up, we were like in heaven. What I would say is don't be too surprised if Lebris is not there in the second season or halfway through. If your owner's looking ahead, you've got to try and look at a way to build. Unless Lebris really just has this transformational kind of approach, like let's say Thomas Frank at Brentford. He got them up, kept them up, and was able to kind of stabilise them. But what I'd say is that sometimes out of the blue, a change is made because the ownership see a different direction. And I'm thinking of the Bournemouth manager that got sacked
Gary
before
O'Neill.
before yeah, Gary O'Neill. No, people are like, well, why are you sacking Gary O'Neill for? He's done really well. But they bought Iraola in, and everyone's like, what's this guy doing? And couldn't win a game for 10 games. And now he's one of the hottest properties. So I kind of just think, yeah, Lebris is there for the moment. It might be that he's your guy long term, but yeah, maybe don't get too attached because sometimes they go when you don't expect it.
I think it's a fair point. And two good examples. Thomas Frank would be the example I would prefer because I really love him, and it's the romantic side of it. But I think you're right in the sense that there has been managerial changes where managers have gone, you've kind of been shocked by it, and then you go, oh, fucking all right, fair enough. But it doesn't get quite as much noise, does it?
Well, I tell you what, if he has a really good spell for you and you guys do really well, then he's on other clubs' radars as well. All of a
100%.
sudden, So we'll see how it plays out. I hope that he does well for you.
Yeah, me too. I think he will. I'm backing him. I'm backing him just in case he's listening. I doubt it, but. Final question. Predictions. I've predicted a draw, I think, every single game. So I'm going to go positive. I'm going to say win. And I'm only going to go with win for one reason. It's the most basic tactical analysis you'll ever get and shows you how untactically astute I am and why I talk about football and don't actually coach in it. Postecoglou plays a high line. We've got fast strikers. It'll be fine. I'm going to be confident and we'll win 2-0. But I don't really feel like that. I actually have a different opinion in my head, but I'm going to go with my heart for this one. I'm going to say 2-0 Sunderland. Why not?
Well, listen, you know what? Um, we play against Real Betis tomorrow night. We've just learned that Murillo is out of that match. We were hoping he'd be back. He's our centre back who has really kind of captured everyone's hearts. He's a swashbuckling player who's really important to us. So, does he play on Sunday? I hope he does, because the guy that comes in is a chap called Morato, who is better. He is a centre back, but he has played left back for us at Arsenal, and he was just terrible. So our back line, is going through a bit of a transition. No Ola Aina. Zinchenko has come in. We know he likes to invert, create a bit of a box midfield. Nico Williams exploits space down the right, so we're going to get forward in the wing areas. Morgan Gibbs White, again, good at carrying the ball, linking play, very creative, very strong at helping in the transition lines. Elliot Anderson, young, dynamic midfielder, really good dribbler, good in tight spaces. He helps create overloads. And with Douglas Luiz coming in as well, providing balance, he's going to be very important in that engine room for Postecoglou. And so I kind of feel that we can threaten Sunderland. If you guys sit narrow, I think we can exploit space. The midfield is going to be key. I know that you've got another player who Enzo Lefebvre. He looks good though. I think if we can win the duel, if he sticks in the middle, we can. We want to try and win that battle. We want to try and provide incisive balls out to our wingers. Hudson Odoi, Dan Ndoye, Delay in Bakwa, one for you to keep your eye on. He played on the right-hand side against Burnley. Didn't have his best game, but he's a young French under-21 player who is quite explosive. So we're going to look to get you guys down the wing. We're at home with a packed-out City ground. We need to get a win under our belt for Ange in the Premier League. We need a home win. But you know what? If things aren't going our way and it's 0-0 at half-time or we go a goal down, it could get very tetchy. I think it'll be a win for Forest. I'm going to say 2-1. I think you'll score. I think that we're going to start to see more of Ange ball clicking into play. We saw it at Burnley. There were some really good moments, Graham, and the only thing that was missing was the finishing. So if we can get our finishing in line into how it should be, whether that's Chris Wood up top or Igor Jesus, our bench is going to be a huge factor for us. Even likes of Omari Hutchinson, who, excuse me, has been left out of the Europa squad. He's not really getting the minutes at the moment in the Premier League. He had a really good outing in the Carabao Cup against Swansea, was involved in both our goals before we capitulated, which is a whole nother story. So I like to see him getting some minutes. So yeah, the long-winded answer is I think win for Forest. There's a little bit about one or two of our players that I'm sure you guys will perhaps know about anyway. Key man for us has got to be Morgan Gibbs White, getting back to his best. He's been off the boil since the whole Spurs head-turning thing. He was good against Brentford first game of the season. Since then, he's been not very good, to be honest with you. And Elliot Anderson, who is the up-and-coming superstar as well. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Win for Forest, I'm afraid.
Greg, really enjoyed that actually, mate. Really enjoyed that chat. Hopefully you did as well. But I hope you have a shite weekend. Good luck after that.
Yeah, you know what? As well, it's difficult because I've really enjoyed chatting with you about Forest and Sunderland, and it comes very genuine when I say it's great to have Sunderland back in the Premier League, and I really hope you guys manage to stay up. At the moment, you're sitting above us in the league. I mean, who am I to say I hope you stay up? We're the ones that have had the dodgy start. You guys are looking good. And if you perform against Forest on Sunday the way you did against Aston Villa, then we're going to have a tough test. And so I'll WhatsApp you after the game. I'm not one to gloat. I'm not one to gloat. I hope you're not either.
No, no, I'm not, mate. I'm not. I'm a fair man. But let's see how many pints I get down me first because I'm going out to watch the game. But Greg,
Amazing.
really lovely chatting. Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much.